And never forget, the underboss was a towering individual with some, like intimidating features where he just stared at you and go, all right, tell me, who are you? Where are you from? And as I'm staring at him, I'm trying to focus on his eyes, and I'm looking past him, and there's a bloody apron from a butcher. There's a meat cleaver, a bone saw, a fillet knife, and I have 5 recorders on me. Every day it was like, today's gotta be the day. They gotta find out. They gotta know. They gotta figure it out. They have to. They're not that stupid. These guys are brilliant minds. They truly are. They just chose a life of crime.
Where were you born, Giovanni?
I was born not far from here in Bayonne, New Jersey. It's a small town. It's a city within New Jersey, and being right outside Manhattan, you had that Manhattan, New York feel to it. Different cultures, different races, color, creed, religions, it didn't matter. We were all Bayonne people, and we were proud of it. But you knew there was an undertone to it. You knew there was an undertone of there's a good side and a bad side. So not everybody, we weren't living like in a Wizard of Oz movie where it was all, love and fairy tales and butterflies. Bayonne was also a safe haven for Mafia guys that, they were born and raised in that area too. They really never had a reason to leave either. They had safety and security. They knew the dirty cops, they knew the good cops, they knew how they can move in the shadows. But even in the shadows, they always stood out. Businesses were heavily influenced, some were. Certain restaurants were heavily influenced that I worked in growing up. My mom would get me a job, and she knew that her friends were connected to mob guys, but I still got jobs there because they knew not to mess with me or not to do anything in front of me. So there was an understanding. There was an understanding between the law and the Mafia of respect. But then sometimes it would get out of hand. People went missing, people got killed. My friends that I went to school with, their dads went missing and eventually were, whacked out, and, were hit. And it was just another day in the life. It was part of our culture, part of our society. And maybe it's because I grew up in a police house, maybe that's why, because maybe to me, I was a little more callous to it. My dad would bring home autopsy photos and show me things at a young age. And I think he was doing it to deter us and to let us to know to be careful because this is what real life looks like, My dad is a hard guy, heavy-handed. I grew up heavy-handed at times. And being a problem child, I think looking back on it, I blame him a lot for it. But looking back on it now as a grown man with kids, I realized my dad didn't have a father himself or a father figure in his life. So he didn't really know how to raise kids. So he raised with a heavy hand. And I understand why he did it now. Back in our day, it was justified to hit your kid with a belt. You know what I mean? And I don't want to condone that type of activity, but listen, it was across the board. You got a smack on the ass, kids got adjusted, and you learned your lesson. Me, I wasn't that quick, I wasn't that bright, I never caught on. So I might have had to, get hit with an extra hand or hit with an extra couple whacks with a belt or something. And then you grow callous to that. So the more I grew callous to it, and then I became defiant towards authority. And that really affected my childhood. Because my relationship with my dad just crumbled from that point. So I was defiant towards him. So what I saw working in the restaurants growing up in the mob and what I saw, I was gravitating towards those guys because it pissed my father off.
So what was it that changed your mind from going into that side of things and begin to become interested in a career in law enforcement?
I always had a burning desire. My dad you'd use my brother and I. So down the street, for example, there was a chop shop. There were some guys, some biker guys, and they were cutting up some cars and, putting the VINs on different cars and doing some, committing some low-level crimes. And he needed to do surveillance when he became a detective. So he had no way of getting up close to them. So what he would do is he would ask my brother and I, take our bicycles, run up the street, look up the driveway, and come back to me with the license plates. So we were, in a sense, already undercovers, right? So and then we'd come back, and he's like, "Wow, this is great. How many cars? What kind of car was it? I don't know. Go find out the make and model. Get the license plate and the make and model." So we drive back there, and there was a little store next door, so we'd make like we were going to buy bubble gum and stuff. And they never paid attention to us. We were kids, so we were feeding them all this intelligence, So at a young age, we felt empowered, And that kind of, it kind of had a sexy feel to it, and exciting feel to it. But growing up and being the kid and the student I knew there's no way I'm never gonna achieve that. I'm not that kind of person. When you're told you'll be dead or in jail by 25, over and over and over, and then you're being told you think nothing of yourself. And I did, I thought nothing. I was a horrible student. You're not like your brother and sister. You're not like everybody else. You're a piece of garbage. You suck. You're stupid. This starts to resonate in your brain. So you go, you know what? I'm just going to hang with the people that are stupid. I'm going to hang with the people that are lower than everybody else. And that's what I did. So I kind of gave up the dream of being a police officer. But then my mom's side of the family had a little bit of outlaw motorcycle gang sprinkled in there. So a couple of my uncles, they were associated with a club. And it was a pretty predominant club in the area at the time, and still is. And they gravitated to that. So I found that sexy. I found motorcycles and cars sexy. So I started working on cars, and my uncle and I were driving trucks and, you know, working on motorcycles on the weekends, building bikes, working on cars. And that kind of like made my father mad too, because he didn't want me with those grease balls and those dirt bags. So so he thought that's his verbiage for them. By high school, they came in. I didn't take my SATs. You know, I didn't bother to take SATs because I had no aspiration to go to college. I knew dead or in jail by 25. So I'm living hard and I'm going to live fast. This is what I'm going to do. And then my dad told me they were giving the test. I said, really, you think I should take it? He said, yeah, give it a shot. You know, so I took the test and, you know, I did well on it, but they were hiring 10 officers and, you know, I came out number 11 on the list and, you know, a little bit of nepotism there. So New Jersey has that built in still. So because of that, they called in a favor and they made an 11th spot for me and I got hired and I got the job.
What were those early years of your career in law enforcement like?
Early years were, it was funny because I was a patrolman, right? So now I had to clean up my act. I had to take my earrings out to become a police officer. I had to lose that whole persona of this outlaw biker I wanted to be and a grease monkey that I wanted to be. So I kind of broke that. I got my little, you know, my hair cut high and tight. You know, I looked like Vanilla Ice when I came out of the academy with the squared off hair. And I was like, oh, this is not me. I had that bad porn mustache and like a cop pad. You know, I bought in, you know, I did. So that's kind of how I started. But after that, I was in a pursuit. I was in it for a pursuit. I caught a guy wanted for murder very early on. I think my first week on the job. He wound up being wanted for murder. So I was already getting awards pinned on my chest within months. So I was aggressive on the job, and I was following in my family's footsteps, making them proud and making the family name proud and all this. And then I guess I got comfortable. And about 9 months in, I figured, you know what? I'm going to ride my motorcycle to work tonight. And I rode my old chopper to work, totally street illegal. And I have a leather vest, a white T-shirt, my uniform, my police uniform pants, and they just gave us 9mm. I have a 9mm gun shoved, not in a holster, just shoved into my pants like, you know, like a biker would do. And my chief sees that, and it was not impressive to him at all. So he went up one side of me, down the other, threatened to fire me. So shortly after that, about 3 weeks later, he called me into his office. I stood on the carpet at his desk, and you know, I'm waiting to get my spanking. And he just goes, so do you still have the motorcycle? I said, I do. And then he asked me to use it for an undercover job. So the DEA was infiltrating a local biker group, international biker group, but they were a local chapter. And he said, look, you know, they're doing this job and you have to buy guns and dope. Yeah, okay, I could do that. But I walked in with an informant. The informant, they teed us up. I met the informant probably 10 minutes before the operation. And I was like, all right. So he's, you know, they want me to buy a .45 handgun and a pound of weed, a pound of marijuana. And you got to understand, back then, a pound of marijuana for the DEA was nothing. You know, they dealt in tons. So they gave me my marching orders. I walk in, and here's this little old biker guy who was well respected in his, you know, famous organization, and he's a legend. And now I'm in front of him. And I walk in, and it smells like, you know, a litter box. It smells like cat urine. I now know he was cooking methamphetamine, which was not popular back then. It was just among the bikers it was. And he's sitting there and he's machining, and he's got these little grandpa glasses on. He looks like Santa Claus, big white beard, looks like Santa Claus at his toy shop. And he's machining some stuff, and I looked, and now I'm supposed to buy a handgun and weed. And I'm like, all right, what are you making? So the informant chats him up, and he says, oh, I'll make him some machine guns. You know, I machine them. And he was a Vietnam veteran. And he says, yeah, I make these for the boys, you know, meaning the outlaws. So I was like, I'm gonna leave with a machine gun. I already made a mental decision of screw the handgun, I'm buying one of those. So I quickly negotiated the sale for that. And he said, yeah, come back and you can buy the stand. It was a tripod stand. Yeah, I'll give you that later on, but I can sell you this part right now. I said, all right, I'll buy a little bit of weed. So I bought just a tiny bit of weed, enough. And I stuck that in my pocket, and I took this little machine gun, and I stuck it in my saddlebags, and I feel like Superman. Superman versus King Kong. Like, you know, I'm the biggest thing right now. So when I came back to the set, they call it the set where you meet the guys. and you come back to debrief, and I have all these DEA agents and my chief and my lieutenants are there. How'd you make out? How'd I make out? Forget that. Here, look at this thing. And I throw it up on a truck, and they're like, what is that? That's a machine gun. You wanted a handgun, I got you a machine gun. And by the way, you're welcome. Like, I had that kind of attitude in my 20s. So I was like, yep, there you go. And they looked at me and they were like, kid, you're an idiot, you know? So then they broke it to me. They were like, hey, the handguns were stolen. That's why we wanted you to buy one. So you screwed that up. The marijuana, where's the marijuana? Oh yeah, the marijuana, here you go. And I gave them like a little bit of marijuana. And they were like, you're an idiot, get out of here. So they kind of poo-pooed me away. I really felt like a failure. And about 2 days later, I'm back in patrol. I'm walking the beat, spinning my stick. You know, I'm walking midnights, and I thought, they're going to punish me. This career it was fun while it lasted. You know, I guess it'll end now. And then they called me back in, and they gave me a chance to go back in and make it right. So that's when the case went a little bit further. So, and it wound up being a successful case in the end, but I realized, you know what, I can't do things my way. But I still did things my way for a long time. I had no training. I probably went 10 years of my career with no training to do undercover work. No communication skills, no rapport building skills, nothing. I just had basic narcotics understanding and investigation and what I knew from the street. And then the FBI came calling, and they offered me a position on a task force with them, and I accepted that, and I became an FBI task force member. And then they knew my undercover work. And that was later, like, I wouldn't say later in my career, but it was enough years where they realized I was broken. And they have a special elite unit for their undercovers, the FBI does, and they do it right. But they wanted to offer me the position, but my mentor then in the FBI, he said, gee, they want to give you the spot, but they think you're broken. They think you can't be fixed. So I'm like a wild dog, you know, and now you want to make me a house pet. It's not going to work. So he was like, they think you're broken. There's no way to change your brain. So my belief was, and I said to them, look, I have to learn the right way to do this job. I want to learn the right way. I have all this trauma. I think I could do something with it. And they gave me the chance. They sent me to their school. It was tough. It was a tough school. But when most people were worrying about what they were going to say, like other classmates in my school, they would worry about, oh my God, how am I going into this scenario? Not my proudest moment, but I'm worried about what I'm wearing into the scenario. You know, I'm worried about, is my hair okay? You know, I'm walking around, they used to call me Sonny Corleone because I look like, I walk around in my white t-shirt before the operations or before they deploy us. And I'm like, hey, does this shirt look good? And they're trying to figure out, all right, how many grams are in an ounce? How many kilos? How many is? And they're trying to do the math so they can negotiate for their life. And I'm trying to figure, I'm ironing my shirt. I'm getting ready for a scenario. I mean, you know, I say that, but it was fun. To me, it was fun. I got a big piece of humble pie real fast, and I gobbled it up because I was like, holy shit. Like, you know, this is serious. So they immersed us in training, and then I became an FBI undercover. Then I realized the art of undercover work is not the art of lying, it's the art of deception. And you truly are an artist. Some artists are good at painting, but we were artists of deception, and we were great at our craft. And to be that level and to operate at that level was tremendous.
So why were you tasked with infiltrating the Mafia?
So I wasn't tasked with infiltrating the Mafia. It came to be just on a happenstance. I did some other cases. I was a supporting actor, if you would, a supporting role in another case where we were infiltrating the Italian Mafia from Italy, the Ndrangheta's. So I had a little bit of taste of that. And then I was given a task to be an associate of a guy who had flipped, an informant. He was a made man in the Gambino crime family. He had become an informant. He was going around the country making tapes against people, and they needed an undercover. So it's my stink. You know, we often refer to it as we have a stink about us, right? Everybody does. Whether it's a Middle Eastern undercover, whether it's the culture is Islamic, and he might have a certain stink about him. He knows how to turn it up and down. You know, Irish guys, Italian guys, whatever it is, we have a stink. I'm from New York. I could turn the accent up to 1,000 or I could turn it down to 2. So depending on what you want, I can control my hands or I can talk with my hands. So the persona is what you put out. So one of my friends one night, he was doing a cocaine deal down in Atlantic City, New Jersey, down the shore. And he was buying some coke off some guys. And he asked me, hey, G, if you're not doing anything tonight, and it was a Sunday night. And he said, if you're not doing anything tonight, if you want to shoot down to AC, I'm doing a dope deal and I could use you. I get there And that whole conversation, that whole deal had just gone, we waited and waited and waited and waited and waited. These guys, their truck broke down. We're running late. I got out of work late. I'm on my way. It's a long drive. And I was like, look, man, we got to leave. We shouldn't be waiting. Cops wait. Bad guys don't wait. Gangsters don't wait. Cops wait. You know, this looks really bad. We're going to get robbed. And he goes, no, it'll be all right. But I just got uncomfortable. Now, as the later in the night went, it's getting really late. The restaurant's closing. We're at a 5-star restaurant. We have already eaten dinner. They were supposed to be here for dinner. I'm looking at the Yankee game. Yankees are losing. I'm a Yankee fan. So now I'm getting more and more pissed off. So now by the time these guys walk in, I had this different persona about me. And I used it. So, and I had complete control of myself by then. And I was like, all right, I'm going to use this to my benefit. And Nick, you know, my buddy that was doing the deal with me, he was like, hey, man, listen, you know, you guys are late. Well, can we order food? He said, no, this is Giovanni. And he went to introduce me. And I just kind of gave a side eye, like a gangster would do. And the kid reaches out his hand to shake my hand. I'm not even shaking your hand. You get me sitting here for 3 hours. Get out of here. And I had this, now I turned it up to 100. Get out of here. Yankees will lose and you got me sitting here like a jerk. Now you want to eat dinner? Yeah, you know what? Here, dessert just came out and it's melted pie a la mode with ice cream and apple pie. And I said, here, you could eat this. And I slid it down the table. I said, this is what you waited for? And I start yelling at my friend. And it was all an act. He bought into it and he knew I was doing a little bit of theatric work for him. So he goes, no, gee, calm down. So I said to the kid, you know, do what you got to do. I don't know why you're here. Why are you meeting these kids? Why are you meeting these are young, in their 30s. These are kids, man. What are you doing? He goes, oh, I got to do a quick deal. He says, well, I got it on me. So I turned around and said, you have what on you? He says, well, I bought the stuff down for him. He's buying, and he's telling me he has cocaine. I said, you have it on you now? Here? You walked in here with it? And he goes, yeah. Get out of here. Get away from my table. I don't know you. I never met you. Now I'm acting like a real gangster. And I go, I never met you. I don't know who you are. So if anybody's listening to this, I don't know who you are. Get away from my table. I don't know you. Get out of here. And then my partner buys into it. And he goes, gee, relax. He says, this guy, I vouch for him. He's okay. You vouch for him? He goes, yeah, I vouch for him. So we did this whole theatric. And this kid, I said, all right, if you vouch for him, then, you know, then fine. I said, but I'm not going back to the can. If I go back to jail, Nick, it's for something I did, not for him. I said, you have it on you here? He says, yeah. And as this little Italian waitress is walking by, now again, I would never do this in my real life. I snap at her. And I go, hey, sweetheart, come here. She stops in her tracks, as my wife would look at me and, are you talking to me? And I go, yeah, you know them things, them bags that you put the food in to go, like, you know, to take with you? A to-go bag? I said, yeah, go get me one of them. And she goes, all right. She comes back, literally throws it at me on the table as she walks by. And I said, now I got to apologize. I said, sweetie, I'm sorry I snapped at you. I said, here. Now I went from Mr. Nice Guy, smiling, apologizing for my actions, to turning this way and being a complete devil. And my persona changed. I stared at him. I said, here, under the table, put it in a bag. And I dropped a couple of F-bombs. I called him some names. And I just belittled him because he was a terrible drug dealer. That's if I go to jail. Here, put it in here. Give it to me. Don't give it to him. Give it to me. If I go to jail, it's because I did something wrong. And I'm saying it over and over and over. Well, this guy took that story and that night and went back up north to North Jersey to the DeCavalcante crime family and told them, last night we went and we had dinner with these two Bruno Scarfo guys, the Philly mob guys. We met him down in Atlantic City. Man, he's a heavy hitter, serious guys. Made up this whole story. And yeah, everybody was impressed. And then they met me. The one guy met me after a while. And the case agent decided where things were going to go. I met a couple of guys, and it just, you know, I'll never forget the one guy, Luigi, I met. He just looked me up and down because I was dressed like this. I was dressed in a collared shirt, nice pants. These guys are schmucks. They're dressed in T-shirts. They run around the street. They're street guys. And I look more like a polished guy, like a gangster would, like the guys I knew growing up in the streets of Bayonne. Like I would emulate their persona. And he just peppered me with questions. Where you from? None of your business. You know, what are you asking me where I'm from? I don't even know you. What are you asking me questions for? I came in to have a cup of coffee, meet you. I'm doing business with this kid, Jimmy. He goes, where are you from? I said, I told you, stop asking me questions. And the whole thing was so tenuous that he was like, I mean, where are your people from? You're from Italy, right? Yeah. So I told him my background. I told him, and it lined up. Oh my God, Sicily. Yeah, I'm from Sicily. You're from Calabria. We could probably be related. You know, so we hit it off. He started buying my goods. And I started selling him some cigarettes and some swag and some stuff that was hijacked. And my persona then was Giovanni Gatto. And he wanted to do business with Giovanni Gatto. So now I had Jimmy, I was doing dope with him. Luigi comes into the picture, I'm doing some swag with him. I'm going to a social club, and I'm becoming known, and I'm just showing my face here and there. And before you know it, like, Jimmy realized I was doing more business with Luigi. So Luigi turns around, he tries to up his game. He tries buying more stuff off me. And it's almost like a high school romance, like this little, like grammar school thing where they got jealous of each other. So Jimmy, he steps his game up, and I guess, he throws down his ace, and he says, well, my uncle is Charlie Stango. You should do business with me. I don't know who your uncle is. And I took a hard stance, and he was like, no, my uncle's a capo. I don't know what that is. You know what a capo is? No, I don't know what that is. Like, what's a capo? He's a captain. Your uncle's a cop? No, he's a captain. He's a captain. Gee, he's like us. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not like you. And I played stupid. I didn't come into this thing because there was a reason why I did that. I wanted them to teach me what the Mafia was. Now, you gotta understand, I sat outside the social club I was in. I sat outside the funerals. I videotaped as an investigator. I knew everybody. When he said Luigi, if he said the name Luigi, I knew he meant Luigi Oliveri. And if I screw up, go, oh, Luigi Oliveri? Hey, I didn't tell you his last name. How do you know his last name? So all those little things you have to be so careful of. Now, to make it worse, Elizabeth, New Jersey is here. Bayonne, New Jersey is here. They're literally right next to each other. So I walk like these people, talk like these people. I lived in the same neighborhood, breathed the same water, drank the same water, breathed the same air growing up. Now, what do I tell them? I had a whole persona. And I did. I had a whole backstory to it. And they bought. And for 2.5 years, almost 3 years, they bought into it. And I moved my way up. And I moved past Jimmy. I moved past Luigi. And I made it into Charlie Stango. And, the FBI had been excited that I was into this thing. And so we never intended to infiltrate the Mafia. It just happened so organically. Long story short, it just happened organically. The DeCavalcante crime family is truly the inspiration for The Sopranos. And I know that for a fact. I know that because I could say that because I've read the FBI reports. I lived the life. I know what the Sopranos series is. I could tell you each character is based on certain people, and where it's derived from. So, yeah, it was tough. The day I went on record with the bosses and I met the administration, I rolled up to the pork store. It's like an episode of Sopranos. And I rolled up into a pork store or a deli that I had done surveillance for 10 years on and watched these guys go in and out of. Now I am literally on this other side of the lens, and I am the one being taken pictures of while I'm inside the Mafia. It was just surreal for me. And it was just like, how do I balance this? How do I survive it? Every day was a surviving task. Every day it was like, today's gotta be the day. They gotta find out. They gotta know. They gotta figure it out. They have to. They're not that stupid. These guys are brilliant minds. They truly are. They just chose a life of crime. And I never intended to move up the ranks. It just happened so organically. From one minute I'm just a hang around, next minute I'm an associate, next minute I was a high level associate running around with captains and meeting with captains, and my capo was, and Charlie Stango was my captain at the end, and he was my capo, and he put me in charge of a crew. He put guys under me. That was crazy. As an undercover, you can only imagine, hold on, wait a minute. You're gonna put guys under me, so now I got criminals that are gonna start reporting to me and kicking up to me? Is that what's gonna happen? Well, yeah. And by the way, I'm gonna put my son under you. That was, wait a minute, hold on. You're gonna put your son under me. Why would you do that? Your son's been aspiring to be you his whole life, So now you have the fear of, I gotta survive the Mafia. I gotta survive guys like Luigi that are jealous of me because I'm making money in the family. All of a sudden I came out of nowhere. Luigi aspires. Guys like the high-level associates aspire to meet with the bosses. The bosses are being called to the pork store for, we called it the cattle dealer. They're coming to this deli to go on record with me, to meet me. They all went out of their way to dress like I am today, wear sports jackets and get dressed up and come out and, and make it known, okay, Giovanni speaks for me, because Charlie wanted to make it known it's official. I'm not a made guy. And it was a whole meeting we had. And he presented me and introduced me, made an introduction and said, this is Giovanni. He's with me. He's now with us. He now flies our flag. This is how it goes. If you need me, you contact him. He speaks for me. and because he was on parole, and I had to answer to bosses. And the bosses sat there, and I'd never forget, the underboss was a towering individual with some, like intimidating features where he just stared at you and go, all right, tell me, who are you? Where are you from? And as I'm staring at him, I'm trying to focus on his eyes, and I'm looking past him, and there's a bloody apron from a butcher. There's a meat cleaver, a bone saw, a fillet knife, and I have 5 recorders on me. 5 recorders. Because they were like, listen, you're meeting with the bosses, we're not missing any of this conversation. Because Murphy's Law is Murphy's Law, right? Like, you can wear all the recorders you want, they all break at the same time, or the batteries run out, or something happens with tech. That's always the case. So they wanted to be extra sure that they got all these conversations. So yeah, I'm wearing multiple wires. I mean, multiple devices on me. And I'm looking at them, I'm holding a conversation, but in the back of my mind, I can hear the narrator in the movie. They're gonna know, they're gonna figure it out. At some point, they're gonna bring you to the bathroom. And it was like this voice in my head, I don't have voices in my head really, but I had this voice in my head that day, and they're like, they're gonna check you. At some point, just be ready. They're coming up behind you. They gotta grab you and strip you down. They have to. It's not like the old days when I can blow a whistle and everybody's gonna come running in. I didn't have backup. I'm on my own at this point in my career. I went and did my missions, and then I would maybe have 1 or 2 people out there that, I give you the recorder when I'm done, and I debrief you, and he takes notes on what, what transpired quickly, and then you'll transcribe the tapes later, and, So it's not like I had a whole SWAT team to come in and rescue me. It wasn't like that. I was truly living the life of a gangster at that point. Flying back and forth from Vegas. I had a place in Vegas. I had a place in New York. Flying back and forth whenever I wanted. Meeting Charlie in his house. We truly were family at the end of it. Truly, truly family. Like, he looked at me, Christmas, I love you, making breakfast. I walked in his house. I didn't knock on a door. I called and said, I'm almost there. And he'd be waiting in the driveway to greet me like you greet your family when they come. I mean, he truly was like a father to me. And, yeah, well, I played a part, but psychologically it takes a toll on you. It'll wear you down. And it did eventually, wore me down. And I realized I was so far gone in it. And I had a government ring, a pinky ring, that I picked from the Hoover building. And it was an expensive ring, but that ring never made it in my house. When I took the ring off, when I made it home to my family, my true family, and I made it home as a father, I would take that ring off and drop it in the truck. And it would never make it out of my car or my truck. It would never come in my house. That was my way of saying, okay, you're not, mentally I checked myself and said, you're not Giovanni Gatto anymore. Now you're Giovanni Rocco. Go be a father, My family would never meet a guy like Giovanni Gatto. He's a piece of shit. He's a piece of garbage. You'll never meet him. A guy like that, you want to see that monster, that would come out at a guy like Giovanni Gatto around my kids. The mishaps, terrible. I thought I had it all under control because of this ring. I thought, oh, I got a good balance. I'm a seasoned undercover now. I got this figured out. Until I was at my daughter's soccer game, and a Gambino guy came walking up, and his daughter was playing my daughter. Literally, he came walking up, and I was like, really? I got my parents here, I got my kids here, my little guy running around, and he comes walking up on me, and thank God I saw him before he saw me, because he would have saw something completely different. I'm wearing flip-flops and board shorts. I didn't look like Giovanni Gatto. I was relaxed. I was in my true form, and I kind of came around and flanked him and got his attention, and then whistled at him, and he turns around and he goes, "What are you doing here?" I said, "No, what are you doing? Give me a kiss," because he's a made guy, so I got to kiss him on the cheek. And I went in and he poked me in the chest. And he got very defensive. And he went, when they talk about shark eyes, like your eyes go black, you can see his whole demeanor change. And you saw the killer that was in him. And he goes, "You following me? What are you doing here?" And now it's pointing. Now it becomes intimidating. "Are you following?" Now he's poking me in the chest. "Did you follow me here? Are you following me on a weekend? Why are you here?" I said, "I'm here because I told you." And I put a spin on it. Again, those the cogs are moving in your brain at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and you better pull something out of your ass as fast as you can, and I did. I was like, "No." I said, "Listen, I have coffee with you and breakfast 4 times a week." I said, "I told you all about this." I said, "You tell me about your daughter playing soccer all the time. I told you the girl I used to date, she had a daughter. See, you don't listen to anything I say. I tell you this all the time. This is the thing with you." And we call each other Cousine, right? Couge. I tell you this all the time. You don't listen to nothing. It's all about you. I told you this whole story, and I made it about him. And I go, I told you about the little girl I was teaching. When you told me she was playing soccer, I said, yeah, I'm teaching a little girl, the girl I used to date. Her old man's in the can. He's being held down in prison. And, you know, I taught her how to play in, and she said, my first tournament, I want you. I said, you don't listen. I told you this 2 weeks ago. Oh, maybe you did. I don't know. Listen, this is what I do on the weekends. This is why I tell you I can't meet on the weekends. I'm immersed in this. I coach here, and he was a family man. And he's like, oh my God, this is, now you know what it's like to be me. And we had a little bit of a chuckle. And inside, I started to decompress and started to breathe again. You know, like that exhale. And I'm like, all right, I think I might survive this. So from that point on, I just didn't come home. I didn't come home a lot. You know, I just figured, you know what, I can't do it. Like, it's just, I got to distance myself. I got to really just stay out in Vegas or stay out in New York. And, you know, and then you just start gravitating away and you start gravitating towards the life a little bit more. You know, I knew there was some problems inside the family. Luigi had some problems with me at the time. He put a claim on me, wanted me to be in his crew. He had been promoted. He had been proposed to be a made member of the Mafia. And then he had gotten his button. We call it the button. You got your button, you got made. And when he got his button, his whole persona changed. He became disrespectful towards the old administration. They didn't like that. And then some things happened inside the family. The boss was stepping down. There was a divide in the family, and a war was brewing within the family, within the two sides of the family. And then crews started going at each other. Different crews started pitting against, because some started backing the new administration. Some thought that some other people should be proposed to be the boss. So there was a lot of friction inside the family. And I was caught in the middle of it. Luigi was on one side, Charlie was on the other, and I'm stuck in the middle. And so at the end, Luigi, he got himself in a little bit of trouble. So they figured, Charlie said to me, he shared with me in Vegas, we were out to dinner one night, and he says, yeah, they're gonna whack him out. Wow, I said, really? And I, at that point, can you imagine now, I'm at the level where I can challenge it, and I could speak up. And I said, whack him out? You know this guy since he was a kid. He came up under you. You're gonna whack this guy out? And again, for me to say those types of things, you can only imagine how comfortable I was in this life. I'm no longer an FBI guy. I'm no longer law enforcement. I'm all in here, you know? And I said, you're gonna whack this guy out? Really? That's what you do to guys? Really? Charles, is that who we are? Yeah, that's who we are. And then again, they go to black guys, and then the veil comes over and you see this darkness overtake him. And he goes, yeah, he's gonna die. And you know, matter of fact, I told the administration, you'll do it. What? That I'll do it. Yeah, you'll kill him. He goes, why, do you have a problem with that? And the minute he said that, I realized, shit, if I don't say yes to this, you know, it's not like I can say, yeah, let me go jump on a call real quick, see if my FBI supervisor says it's okay that I kill this guy. And then I was all in. I was like, yeah, okay, sure. But at that very moment, I knew, I knew the case was gonna come to an end. I knew this would be what ends the case. So as I was on a trajectory to be inside the mob, it was explained to me that when you do this, you'll be promoted, you'll be a made member. I had that conversation on tape, and you know, I listen to those tapes to this day, and it's like, you know, I could get stuck on the fact that I was gonna be made, you know, but it wasn't meant to be. You know, I see what a mature investigator I am now. Because any young undercover would say, I'm staying in this until I get made. I want to be the first undercover FBI guy to ever be made in the mob. First law enforcement guy to ever be made, you know. So that was a huge feather in my cap, and I wanted it. That was the pinnacle of my career. So, but then I quickly realized, you know what, just it's time to get out. Like, my time is now. I'm not gonna kill this guy, Luigi. I planned a murder for months. I gathered my evidence. The investigator in me kicked in again. I planned it out. I gathered a ton of information. I tied the bosses in. I tied the administration into the conspiracy that they had given the approval to do it. I tied some other guys into the conspiracy. I got Charlie, I got Luigi, I got all these guys that I was dealing with. And, you know, the case was successful in the end, but, you know, it was a great case for the Bureau, but, you know, it was a great case for me, and it's what I'm most known for, I guess, because everybody loves a good mob story. But the ending wasn't good for me. The ending, it ruined my career, forced me to retire. What I thought was going to be a career till I'm 65 and do the job that I truly feel I was born to do until I was an old man. And, you know, until you force me out and drag me out, I'll die on this job. I'll die of a heart attack or natural causes when I'm 90 if I could, because I love this job. And then all of a sudden, you know, before I'm even 50 years old, it's pulled out from under me, and now what?
What happened to Charlie at the end of the operation?
Charlie got arrested at the end of the operation. I said my goodbyes to him. I had an emotional moment in his garage. And I said my goodbyes to him, knowing I knew that his door was going to be kicked in at 5 o'clock the next day, right? And he hit me on the back of the head like this, like my uncles would do, like my Italian uncle would do. And it was just a moment because I knew it was our last moment together. I knew. He didn't know, but I knew. And I had to hold it together. And I was just like, all right. And then he goes, all right, come here. I'm happy. He's happy because I'm killing somebody. Because I told him, I'm going home tonight. That's why I was leaving. I'm getting on a plane tonight. My two biker guys, Dutch and the other guy, put him down someplace. We got him. I know where he is. He's dying tonight. I'm getting on a plane. I'm going home and killing him tonight. Ah, it's beautiful. I can't wait. Let me know as soon as it's done. You know. And he gives me the smack on the back of the head. He says, come here, I love you. I love you. Now, I don't know whether he's playing me. Maybe he's like, you know, but he knew. I genuinely knew he cared for me. I knew he looked at me as a son. And, you know, I cared for him. And I felt bad that he was going back to prison. I felt like, dude, you know, just tell him where the bodies. There was a moment in me that had that, like, moment of just saying, dude, listen to me. You know, let me just call the U.S. attorney. Let me call. Just get on board. Tell him where the bodies are buried. Get out of jail. You know, help yourself. Help this, help that. But he got arrested the very next day. Took it like a champ. He's a gangster's gangster. He did his 10 years in prison. From what I understand, recently he had been out. He violated his parole. He's a very old man now. And I guess he's in his 80s now. Violated his parole recently, and he was put back inside. From what I understand, he's now the underboss of the family. So he's still rising through the ranks. The Mafia still exists. The Mafia is still there. You know, they're still up to their old tricks. They're still up to new tricks. They're into everything that they want to be into. They're probably stronger now than they were 10 years ago, I think. They're starting to reorganize. You know, they're here. They're all over the city. They're all over everywhere. And the bosses, Luigi got made. Luigi's a made member. And that's official. He runs his own crew now. I guess he's still in it, I would imagine. Yeah, a lot of guys went back to it. Some of the guys have passed away. But for the most part, you know, right back to it. It's the life they chose, and you know they're committed to it. And I respect that. Look, I chose the good guy's side. You chose the bad guy's side. You know, you picked a team, and you're loyal to it. So for me, I guess that's my Bayonne attitude is, well, at least you're loyal to the team you picked. I don't like the team you picked, right? It's Yankees and the Boston Red Sox, right? We don't like each other, but you know what? Good on you. You won this one. And it's always a World Series. That's how I look at it. You know, we'll get you next time.
When you're in the thick of it, when it's really life and death, how much of you is Giovanni Rocco? How much of you is Giovanni Gatto?
So I guess they're all me. It's just different components. And I look at Giovanni Gatto as the kid that Giovanni Rocco could have been, right? If he didn't die or go to jail. And that's my best way to explain it. That's who Giovanni Gatto is. If Giovanni Rocco didn't decide to become a police officer and go into law enforcement, he would have been Giovanni Gatto his whole life, and damn, I would have been a great gangster. I would have been and I used to say that to the FBI. Guys in my squad, I used to break their horns and say, like, guys, you guys are so lucky I'm on your team.
Frank was sitting in the motor. He was my driver, old Frank. He went, what's going on? I said, tomorrow, I said, at 7 o'clock in the morning, go and get Kennedy. That was my sawn-off shotgun. It was named after President Kennedy. I said, and I want one chamber, one buckshot filled with rock salt, and the other one with the normal buckshot in, all right? Yeah? I'm not messing about with these people. They're dangerous. I'm going to shoot them.